practices now that you need to follow to migrate your workloads to the cloud. And this is known as the Cloud Adoption Framework. And as you know, I'm usually not alone on the show. So today I have Sarah Lynn with me to help us understand today's topic better. Hi, and good afternoon to you, Sarah.
Hiya, Kazim. Thank you for having me today.
Yes. So you're welcome to the Tech Talk show this afternoon. But just before we dig in, Sarah, I want you to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. So who is Sarah Lynn?
Yeah, so I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft, and as you may be able to tell from the accent, I am based in Scotland. So as a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft, my job is to help evangelise our technologies at Microsoft and try and fill in some of those gaps and answer some of the questions that customers might have, and also help that feedback loop for our customers to our engineering teams and our engineering teams back down to our customers. I haven't always worked at Microsoft though. I have been in the IT industry for well over 14 years now, and I've made my career in the infrastructure side of things, so the IT pro or system admin role, and I've really enjoyed it. I've worked for various different companies over my years. I've worked both inside an IT department and also for managed service providers, helping other customers as well. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, Kazim.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Sarah. So let's dig in now, proper, Sarah. So, I don't want the listeners to start to think that the Cloud Adoption Framework is another, Azure service, is another service now up on Azure. So I would like us to start with you telling us about what the Cloud Adoption Framework is, Sarah.
Yeah, so the Cloud Adoption Framework is a set of guidance basically to help you tackle some of the questions or challenges or concerns that you might have if you're looking to adopt the cloud in your organisation. Now, it's made up of various different pieces of that puzzle. So there's documentation that you can sit and read and work through. There are trackers that you can, answer some questions, track your progress, see where you are, see what your next steps are. We have some templates, so some forms to fill in so that you can keep track of your project. We have templates in terms of DevOps templates if you want to start going down that route for project planning. Yeah, there's lots of people have contributed to this cloud adoption framework, though. It's not just Microsoft people that have contributed to it. There's also people within our partner ecosystem and our customers who have inputted their guidance into this framework. So hopefully it's quite a comprehensive and easy to understand framework, Kazim.
Okay. So I know some people with some basic background now of cloud computing might be wondering and thinking, wait a minute, there are a number of tools that we can use to migrate, our workloads to the cloud. So please, Sarah, why is it so important and why do we need it?
So I think the cloud adoption framework is important and something that organisations can look to because it helps answer some of those questions that you might come up against when you're looking at your cloud adoption strategy. So it could be as simple as, what do we call all of our resources within Azure? What's the appropriate naming convention that we need to come up with for our resources? The cloud adoption framework helps you with that. There are some weird and wonderful caveats where you can't have capital letters in some of your resources, and it helps you to understand those processes and makes those decisions easier for you. But it also helps with some of the bigger questions as well, because sometimes we see our customers looking to embark on a cloud adoption strategy, and it's the IT department that have started that conversation off. They want to use the latest and greatest technology, but they have to convince the people with the budget. They have to convince their bosses and, the finance director to release some of that money. But often it can be challenging for them to try and translate the value of moving to the cloud. So the Cloud Adoption Framework has sections that can help you build that business case, that can help you translate the value both from a technology point of view and also a business strategy point of view, and help those people in the IT department bridge that gap to having those conversations with the CEO or the finance people and driving that forward. The other thing with the Cloud Adoption Framework is, let's face it, a lot of organisations have already migrated to the cloud. It's not necessarily a new strategy anymore. However, for a lot of organisations, it can be quite daunting for them. It can be quite an arduous task for them. And the framework gives them a reference, something to guide them along the way, to understand and help them with that conversation. It can either guide you or it can actually validate the decisions that you've made. So you could be in a design strategy meeting and then someone says, why have you picked that? You can pull up the Cloud Adoption Framework and say, well, here's some best practice references and this is why I've made this choice, and kind of back up your choices as well, Kazim. So yeah, it gives you a lot of value, I think.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. Now, I'm sure there are a number of processes, right, and components, if I can call it that now, that makes up the Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure. So, Sarah, can you please help us? Can you walk us through this important component that makes up the CAF?
Yeah, so as I said at the start, it's built up of a bunch of components, Kazim. So you have things like the documentation, which I'll be honest, it can look a bit daunting when you start to click into it because there's a lot of documents there and you think, I'll never make my way through this. But it can be dissected into parts. It's not something that you need to read from the start to the end. You can dive in and pick the parts that you need for your organisation and then move on to another part. But it's not just that we have. Like I said, we have trackers that you can use to answer some questions and then get back prescriptive guidance about where you can think about going within your cloud adoption framework and you know, jumping into which section is more appropriate to fit your business needs and your motivations. We also have templates and checklists that can help you, you know, if you're in a design meeting or you're interviewing people about a workload, there's some checklists that can help you guide you along those questions and make sure you're gathering the right information from that stakeholder or that person that owns the application. So there's a lot of components to it. The one thing I want to talk about is that, like I said, it's broken up into sections, so you can pick and choose the sections that you look at. You don't have to follow all the way through, and you don't have to work through every bit of the documentation to have a successful cloud adoption strategy for your organisation. Some of the sections are things like govern. And that's kind of maybe self-explanatory. It helps you with that governance for your cloud adoption framework, understanding like the naming conventions, how do you manage costs, how do you manage, you know, if you have regulatory compliance that you need to meet for some of the audit compliances, how do you deal with all of that? Another section that I really enjoy, sounds quite sad that I enjoy reading the cloud adoption framework, but the ready section of the cloud adoption framework actually starts to talk about the technology a bit more and actually starts to get you hands-on deploying the technology and building up those basic resources that you need in Azure to be able to host a workload. So there's a lot of sections and a lot of places that you can get information. But yeah, please let me emphasize that again, you don't have to start at the very start of the cloud adoption framework and work it all the way through to have a successful cloud adoption strategy or a migration. You can dip in and use it. So please don't be daunted if you go to and see a lot of information there for you.
Okay, thank you for that. So when customers adopt the cloud, right, there are often some known blockers I believe that they usually face or experience. And you as someone who engages with customers from time to time now, do you mind to share, you know, some of these known blockers that people usually experience, that customers usually experience, and what they can do to overcome them?
Yeah, so I think every customer's potentially going to have a unique set of blockers depending on their technology and stuff like that, Kazim. But there are a pattern that we kind of see with some of our customers. One of them can often be, where do you start? Where do you actually start? If you've got thousands of servers, if you've got thousands of workloads, where do you actually begin? And that's where the Cloud Adoption Framework can help you try and strategize. It can actually try and help you understand what to focus on at the very start of your project. There's some templates that can help you guide and build that project plan, build the teams that you need in order to start having the right conversations and having a look at all of the workloads. I'll give you a big spoiler. The Cloud Adoption Framework tells you not to start with your most mission critical workload. You should be starting with things that aren't potentially going to be harmful to your organisation if you were to move them into the cloud. Great example is don't start with your payroll application or your HR system, because if you move that and something goes wrong, someone's going to notice, because they're the really important applications and workloads. So the Cloud Adoption Framework helps you with those decision-making processes. It helps you try and work through that process. Another blocker, like I said earlier on, is actually building that business case. Because if it's the IT department that are starting this project because they might want to play with the new and shiny technology, it can be hard to show the business the value of that versus what the investment's going to be. So the Cloud Adoption Framework can really help you dial in to understand the technical benefits and also the financial benefits and the business benefits that the business are going to get from freeing up some of the technology and some of the coolness that we have within Azure. So those are some of the key ones, and that's why the Cloud Adoption Framework is able to help you depending on your motivations, and you can dive into it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. We need to go on a short break now, and we'll be back in just a little bit. All right, you're welcome back. It's still the Tech Talk Show with me, Kazim, this afternoon. And again, I've still got Sarah Lynn on the show with me, walking us through Cloud Adoption Framework today on the show. I'm curious now, Sarah, if a customer is already using Azure, right, and did not start with the Cloud Adoption Framework, all of the best practice of adoption, Cloud Adoption Framework, what would your recommendation be to this customer? Is it, can they still implement it at a later time? And for those customers, it's going to be two questions in one now. For a customer who wants to start as well, must they implement all of the best practices at once, or can they just start small and begin to add up to it as cases demand?
Yeah, so taking an existing customer, if we think about someone who's already using Azure, they might head towards the framework because they potentially have an issue. And we see this quite often, Kazim, because people have went and implemented something within Azure, they've enjoyed the technology, they've enjoyed the benefits that it's come to, and then they've been hit with the bill. They've got that big bill at the end of the month, and the business are like, why is that there? Can we optimize? And that's where they can start to implement some of the things within the framework, because they've missed out the step about cost management and cost optimization, and they come into the framework and it starts to help them dial in to some of those technologies and almost retrofit it into the environment. So that's one of the common use cases where we see a lot of customers coming into the framework. And that could be because they had to react to a situation. They maybe had to scale up their website because there was a sale coming up and the internal website couldn't cope, or something even blew up, Kazim, and they actually had to, put something in place, and they couldn't get the hardware because, I'm sure we all remember when hardware can take like 3, maybe even 4 months to actually come to your organization. So those are great use cases for the framework to come in and help you once you've got into the cloud. And now, if you're a brand new customer to the cloud and you're starting to look at the framework, you're starting to understand how to use Azure within your environment. Like I said, it's modular, so you do not have to start off with everything, and you don't have to tick off every best practice within the Cloud Adoption Framework to have a successful migration or a cloud adoption strategy in your organisation. And this is where you'll start to look at some of the trackers, because they'll help you focus in on the key motivations and why you're moving to Azure. So, for example, if you're moving because your data center lease is expiring and you have to be out by a certain date, at the end of the day, you need to be out of that data center by a certain date. You don't have flexibility potentially to kind of overrun this project. So the trackers will help you key in on those motivations and help you drive towards that. And then afterwards start to look at some of the other things that you can implement, because that's your key objective. Your key motivation is to be out of that data center by a certain day. It's not necessarily to have everything in place. It would be nice, obviously, if you had all the best practices in place from day one, but let's be realistic, it doesn't work like that in the real world. So yeah. you definitely don't have to do everything all at once. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Yes, thank you so much for that clarity. Now let's talk about roles and responsibilities for a little bit now. I would like to get your advice on or concerning roles and responsibilities in the Azure Cloud Adoption Framework. How does everyone, that's the admin, the DevOps people, the users, how do people know what their role and responsibilities are leveraging Cloud Adoption Framework?
So one thing we see a lot of customers spin up is something called the Cloud Centre of Excellence. This is a team of people from every part of the organisation, not just the IT department, because you maybe have someone from the finance department there, you might have someone there from human resources, you might have somebody from marketing, because let's face it, everybody looks at technology differently. You know, the people who use it for finance really probably only care about the payroll application in those few days that they need to run the payroll, whereas marketing will look at it from a different point of view. And you have to make sure that everybody's voice is heard alongside this cloud adoption strategy. And like you said, everybody in the IT department will have a different motivation and different needs as well. So your developers will potentially have a different point of view and different needs from your operations teams as well. So if you bring together everybody's voice in the Cloud Centre of Excellence, you can start to actually look at who should be responsible for what and start to dial down where the responsibilities are. And this might actually start to lead to some cultural changes potentially within your organisation or even just within your IT department, where you don't have people who are just solely developers or just solely operations teams. You might start to shuffle everybody around and start to build up new teams and think about a DevOps or an agile approach where you work together and don't work against each other, and you know, just be more collaborative. So there's lots of things for organisations to think about in terms of roles and responsibilities. But again, going back to your earlier question, this isn't something you have to have in place from day one, and it isn't going to be perfect from day one. Again, real world scenarios, this doesn't happen. It would be lovely if we could have it all working, but please don't worry about having to do this. I have had customers who have had to cycle through parts of the Cloud Adoption Framework at the very start, got to a dead end, and then had to start again and reiterate. And that's just part of the cloud adoption strategy and how you as an organisation have to evolve, because cloud adoption is all about, isn't just all about technology. There's also a cultural element to how you organise your teams, how you organise your finance within it. So yeah, there's lots to think about with there. So hopefully that helps a bit.
Yes, thank you. So in wrapping up, I don't want us to wrap up without you sharing with our listeners now how they can get their hands on learning materials and learning resources now. So can you please help us, Sarah, with where we can get learning resources, learning materials about the Cloud Adoption Framework?
So there's two resources I'd want to share with you. If you want to go directly to the Cloud Adoption Framework itself, if you go type into your favourite browser, type in aka.ms/CAF, so CAF, you'll get to the Cloud Adoption Framework. And the second resource is another URL. So again, go into your browser and type aka.ms/Microsoft Learn. Now, Microsoft Learn is our free learning platform at Microsoft, which has a whole load of information and training courses that you can learn on various different technologies, from Azure to Office 365 to Dynamics, and the Cloud Adoption Framework. And it takes you through in a different vein. So the first link I shared is all about the documentation, and it's a lot of bedtime reading for you to have a look at. Whereas if you go into Microsoft Learn, some of the courses in there are focused around customer stories. So it takes you through, I think it's Tailwind Traders, that fictional company that you might have heard Microsoft talk about, and their journey, and it relates to some of the people who are in the IT department and some of the wider things. So it gives you a bit more of a narrative, and you can relate to it a bit better. So those are the two links that I would say to everybody to bookmark and have a look at, because they'll be very useful to understanding the Cloud Adoption Framework.
Thank you very much. So, all right, that's it. That's what we have for you on the Tech Talk Show this afternoon. Thank you so much, Sarah, for spending time with me and our listeners, on the Tech Talk Show today. I don't know if there are any last words from you that you'd like to share before we say bye-bye.
Just that the cloud adoption, strategy that you might be going on in your organisation can seem a bit daunting at first, but it is definitely rewarding, both from a business point of view and as a techie. You get to play with some awesome technology, so it's definitely worth some of the pain that you might have to go through.
Okay, how about your word out there for the students listening in? We're having this now from a university community radio station. in Lagos, Nigeria. LASU is the name of the university. So do you want to say, what advice do you have to the student listening to you right now?
Keep learning. You can't know it all, but you can learn it all. So experiment, try new things, learn new things, share your knowledge as well, share it with your peers, share it with the wider community, and have fun and focus on what you enjoy, and don't necessarily focus on what you see trending on Twitter. Focus on the things that you enjoy and learn it all.
So remember, if you subscribe to the channel already, is the Tech Talk Wednesday up on YouTube. So there you can also have a rewatch of the past episodes. So from myself, and I also have Umidon, producing the show for us this afternoon. From myself, you want to say hello, Umidon?
Yes, hi.
Okay, so my producer is saying hello to you, Sarah.
Hiya.
All right, so from myself, Umidon and Sarah, it's bye-bye. Continue to keep safe.